What was the greatest pain you have ever felt? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. To this day, I have no clue what it was. I was around 16 years old and dreaming. In my dream, I was on a small sailboat. The wind suddenly changed direction, and the horizontal part of the mast hit me in my stomach. As soon as it happened, I woke up to the worst pain of my life in my abdomen. I thought my appendix burst or something. I was so nauseous, I had to crawl out on all fours to the toilet. Not that I could stand up from the pain anyway. After dry heaving for about 15 minutes and trying to wake someone to call an ambulance, the pain disappeared completely in an instant. I walked around for a few more minutes, contemplating whether or not I should still go to a doctor. In the end, I decided against it, and I went back to sleep. Ruptured appendix. Went to the ER. They told me it was UTI, prescribed the meds, and sent me home. I endured the pain for a week. I could not get up without help. I was literally crawling from my bed to the bathroom every time I have to use it. At some point, the pain went away, so I went back to the doctor to get me cleared for work. When he checked, he said my appendix already ruptured and I need to have surgery immediately. Bone marrow transplant. Not the process, but the following month of chemo and immunosuppressive treatment to prevent rejecting the stem cells. It caused a condition called mucositis, which basically means your entire gastrointestinal tract is inflamed. Your mouth is burning, your throat is burning, your stomach is burning, all the way down to and including your ass. It causes big open sores that hurt like canker sores, except they're more painful and gigantic. The roof of your mouth is hanging in strips, with each strip somehow preserving the ability to send pain signals to your brain for good measure. The throat experiences the same, so swallowing is impossible. It feels like shards of glass are passing through your esophagus. I had several of those cardboard trays next to my bed every day for 2 weeks just to spit out the blood that accumulated in my mouth. It absolutely fucking sucked, and it hurt so bad. Saved my life. 10 out of 10. Would do again if necessary. Would not recommend for recreational purposes. Had a stroke at age 22. Being paralyzed on my left side of my body for 8 months. At the time when I was paralyzed in the hospital, I felt like my life was over. Not able to work, go out and explore the world that I have dreamed of doing. Unable to walk and unable to hold anything with my left hand. What my girlfriend would think of me when I tell her I'm unable to do things because of my side effects. It made me wish the stroke killed me instead. Months of thinking I'm trapped here, unable to do anything. Most depression and the most painful thing in my life. 6 years later, I got most of my mobility back, but not fully back. That part of my life I will never forget. When I was 5 years old, my mom had a heart attack. She didn't make it. Of course, me being 5 years old, I didn't know what was going on. Me and my sister both thought that she was sleeping. I kept asking my dad why she was not waking up. When it came time for her to wake, that's when I realized what was going on, and I just cried and cried. My dad comforted me, but we both just cried. I don't know how I remembered, but I did. Acute open-angle glaucoma. I've had kidney stones. I've sat in pain while a doctor shot me up with a fluid he could image to tell me that the stone cut me all the way out while I peed late night. This was more than that. The inner ocular pressure was so high, it felt like someone had stabbed a flathead screwdriver into the back of my head through my eye and slowly twisted it back and forth. For days, I was taking so much migraine medicine, I started shedding my stomach lining. Finally decided to remove the eyeball. I woke up during surgery. Long story, but they needed to look at and potentially fix a bleed I had in my brain. Basically, they stick a catheter into a vein in your thigh, and they worm its way through your veins up into your brain. I went to the surgery not very worried because it seemed fairly minor. They bring you into the surgery room, knock you out with some anesthesia, they do the thing, then you wake back up. Well, apparently when I went in, one of the machines broke down. At the end of the surgery, they need to seal the wound in your thigh as it's in a fairly major place, and you just bleed out if they did nothing. So what that machine does is put a great deal of pressure on the wound so the body can clot it up properly. Instead, they had one of the people there put pressure on my leg rather than using the machine. Not exactly optimal, but it effectively does the same thing. He did have to lean into my leg fairly hard though, and this is where the anesthesia wears off and I wake up. Now, it's probably better to tell the story from my parents' point of view. The surgery finishes, and the doctor goes to tell them how everything went. He says that they weren't exactly able to fix the problem, but otherwise things are fine. Then, from down the hall, they hear me, "Holy fuck, my leg, stop it, ah!" The doctor's eyes go wide and he rushes off to figure out what happened. From my point of view, it was only a few seconds, maybe 10. I wake up, big guy putting all of his weight into one point on my leg. Pain. I yell. A bunch of nurses rush over to hold me down, telling me to relax. They turn the anesthesia back on properly, and I'm back out like a light. Apparently, the delay with the broken machine was enough to make it so that the anesthesia wore off a bit early. A little while later, after everything's done, I wake up properly. I'm wondering what the fuck happened, and everyone relays the story to me. 2 out of 10. Wouldn't recommend. A little more than 6 years ago, a drunk driver hit me while smoking crack and meth and speeding down a Tennessee state highway, 65 plus miles per hour. It shattered my left leg and broke the right and threw me 60 feet through the air. I was knocked out instantly. When my head and brain caught up with my body midair, no pain has ever matched that constant, horrendous, mind-numbing agony I experienced for about 6 weeks, 2 months after, just from the whiplash. The doctor fixed the titanium rod to the unbroken ends of my tibia in surgery, but the whiplash pain was so great I barely noticed the fresh surgery trauma. Despite getting 60 plus milligrams of Percocet and IV dilated every day, multiple times a day, the first relief I got was 2 weeks later in a rehabilitation hospital I was moved to when my friends brought me enough weed to smoke a joint in the parking lot. I know this is minor compared to lots of these on here, but after my wisdom tooth removal, I had a bad dry socket and the oral surgeon had to clean it up prior to packing it. He said it might sting a bit when they sprayed it, but I was not expecting excruciating pain so bad I had to be held in my seat by the techs. Later, I found out it was raw exposed nerves being sprayed by cold water. Ow. I had hemorrhoid surgery, okay? First 2 days I had morphine, so I was good except for a splitting headache from the morphine. Then the morphine was discontinued, but my surgeon had left town with no orders. I was losing my mind from pain. I mean, my whole anus and rectum were sliced and diced, and all I could get was Tylenol. On day 4, and mind you, I'm in the hospital but not officially admitted, I'm on observation. On day 4, I'm trying like hell to have a BM, but there's just blood pouring out of my bottom and I'm screaming in pain, almost passing out. Finally, a nurse gets a different surgeon in who discovers my bowel is impacted from opiates with no stool softeners or IV fluids. So he has to reach into the freshly operated on opening to manually pull out hard stool. I sleep a little, then wake up with chills and fever and unable to pee. I have a raging kidney infection from my bladder being paralyzed by the opiates. I gave birth 3 times without so much as an aspirin, and that hurt. But this was absolutely hellish. So this and dry socket tops my physical pain list. You win. Losing my boyfriend due to a sudden heart attack. It's been nearly 2 years and I'm still hurting. Not trying to wallow, and it is getting easier, but then something happens and I think of him and how much I miss him. He loved to send me pictures of the moon when it was full, and I noticed tonight's full moon while coming back from the store tonight, and I thought of him. I stood on my porch while gazing at the full bright moon and told him that I missed him before walking into the house. Norovirus. I picked it up hiking in Virginia somewhere before Gatlinburg. I've gotten stitches all over my head, crushed 2 fingers, fractured my tailbone, and had legit food poisoning, not the tummy ache shit people say, the sleeping on the floor of the bathroom type. It was the only time I ever passed out from pain, and it happened over and over. It was like a constant fever dream. I slept in the tub so that whenever I was shitting straight liquid or vomiting anything I drank, I could just turn the shower on. I've been shot in the foot with a .45 by a careless sailor that shattered 2 metatarsals, crushed a vertebrae in my back, and flew off the handlebars of my bike when I was 9, major concussion and 75 stitches in my forehead. But the most pain I've ever felt was from pleurisy. Every single breath I took was the most searing pain that was unbearable. I had pneumonia that turned into pleurisy, which is an inflammation of the lining in your lungs. Worst thing I've ever experienced. It lasted for about 18 hours before it subsided due to getting to the doctor and getting on an antibiotic for the pneumo and some pain meds and anti-inflammatories. I gritted my teeth so hard I thought they were going to break. Wouldn't wish that on anyone. The two worst pains I have ever felt was one, meningitis, which was at the very brink of killing me. I'm lucky I actually survived it. It caused my brain to swell and press against my skull, which gave me some permanent brain damage. The second is some extreme lung pain I had episodically for over 6 months, which made my heart rate skyrocket over 160 sometimes, as well as make anything more than tiny breaths feel like legitimate knives in my chest. Definitely barotrauma. I have chronic sinusitis, and the 4th time I flew, no idea why it didn't happen before, was the most horrible experience I've had. When we started to descend for landing, it started off with just a little pressure, but every feet we got closer to the ground, needles started to smash through my skull, going down my teeth. I remember looking at my girlfriend and telling her I thought my head would explode and I was going to die. I was shaking and in tears for a solid 20 minutes, where it felt like 2 hours. Couldn't even speak anymore after a while. After the landing, the pain subsided pretty quick, but had a severe infection for a solid week on holidays. I love traveling, but it's still a massive PTSD every time I board a plane. Luckily, my doctor advised me to take Afrin and antihistamines, and I only have it like 20% of the landings. I had ingrown toenail surgery on both feet, big toes. I was warned that I should have someone drive me home. Stupidly thought, it'll still be frozen, I'll be fine. Just after leaving the parking lot, they began to hurt. 10 minutes later, every tiny movement, let alone pushing the pedals, feels like hot irons inserted under and around my massively inflamed toenails. I nearly blacked out from the pain and finally just pulled over and had to call for help. Testicular cancer DX, age 30 in 2020. They took righty, F that guy, always a troublemaker. 3 rounds of high-potency chemo for 3 months on the daily. Unless you need it to survive, chemo sucks. Thankfully, they said Lefty was healthy enough to resume usual duties. My 3-year-old and 16-month-old are proof of that. #Uniballer. #cancer can suck my ball. Alcohol withdrawal. Had been on a bender for at least a week, stopped suddenly, and was in agony for 2 days. It felt like my body was trying to turn inside out. I was dry heaving, sweating, having audio hallucinations. It just would not stop. I called telecare finally because every part of my body was shaking violently. They immediately got 911 on the line and got me to the hospital and pumped me up with Valium for a few hours. It was my rock bottom for sure, and I haven't drank since. I've had bigger pain from surgeries or ear infections, but this was the worst because I really saw that I was potentially going to die, and I kinda didn't care because I wanted the withdrawal to stop. Alcohol withdrawal can kill you easily. If you have any of these symptoms and they aren't stopping, please seek medical attention. Also a shout out to r/stopdrinking who convinced me to call telecare that day. Gallbladder. Woke up in excruciating pain like I'd never felt before. Then it got progressively worse on the way to the ER. By the time they got me to the operating room, IV painkillers wouldn't even help. When I eventually woke up in recovery, my surgeon told me, "I see a lot of burst gallbladders here, but this is the first time I've seen one that had exploded." I spent 4 months in the hospital with 5 more surgeries. While they tried to rebuild my biliary system, I still have residual adhesion pain 16 years later, but I survived. So far giving birth. I had an epidural with my first, and it was magical. Played video games with my husband till I had to push. With my second, I had one also, but it didn't take, and I wasn't even prepared for the horrible pain. It felt like I was being tortured, and my insides were ripping apart. I hope to never feel that pain again or anything worse. Cutting the top of my index finger off. When my husband and I got married this spring, one of our first purchases with a wedding gift card was one of those Ninja bullet blenders from Target. We got it to make homemade salsas, iced coffees, and acai berry bowls. Upon returning from Target and unboxing it, I put it under hot water in the sink and sprayed the inside with some Dawn liquid soap. I grabbed a sponge, and before my husband yelled, "Isn't that too sharp?" I had stuck my hand down to wipe out the blender. The blades cut through the sponge and through my index finger. At first, I didn't realize how badly I was hurt. I kinda zoned out and looked at my husband, whose eyes were wide open, seeing as he saw the sponge cut into shreds. I held my hand up to examine it and saw the top of my finger was hanging sideways off the bone. As soon as I saw it, I was like, "Ow." Bizarre. Husband grabbed a wad of paper towels and my poor hand whisked me out the door to the ER. I remember feeling like vomiting in the passenger side floor, but deciding to roll down the window instead. Super strange feeling, like you're hot and sweaty, but also cold. Know where you're going and what happened, but don't. Weirdest part was feeling the blood actively squirting out of my finger as I was holding the tip on through the paper towel. Got to trauma room 1 at the ER, and doctor immediately jammed needles right down into my finger to numb the pain. I don't know what was worse, the initial slice and shock, or feeling that first needle being jammed through. Lots of stitches, and a few months later, I have no feeling in the upper quadrant of my finger. No feeling on the fingertip. Very strange. We did end up using the Ninja Bullet Blender though. Makes wonderful salsa. Physical. Prolonged were labial hematoma, bruised so heavily it was black and swollen and hard when touched. I ended up on strong NSAIDs, also a bruised and broken coccyx, couldn't have it x-rayed due to COVID. Both took around a month to heal and drove me insane. Can't think about a short-term one, maybe when I pieced straight through my lip when I was skating as a child. Emotional, every time I get suicidal, and my whole existence hurts, and all I can do is cry and hide all of the sharp objects. Medicated now and happy, but it's the scariest pain imaginable. Love. Finding out one of my best friends had sex with my girlfriend, it's a hard pill to swallow. I've also broken my middle finger bone and dropped a weight on my toe, and my toenail flew off. I think that emotional pain still hurts more than physical pain. It's like a warfare in your brain. You question you, people around you. Where do I go from here? Was it all a lie? Who's my real friend? Am I a loser because of this? Envisioning them doing it. I was 19, and nothing like that has happened to me before. All my friends until that point were really good to me, and I've always trusted people 100%. It woke me up to the real world, I guess. People don't really care about you as much as you think they do. It's pain that you feel in your chest and can't get rid of. I let those thoughts run around in my brain for months, some of the worst months of my life. Gets better. This year in February, my father, who was 79 years old, was brutally stabbed protecting his neighbor from an intruder. I wish this was a fake story. He made it and is strong and healthy, but between finding out through a neighbor he had been stabbed, driving somehow there, finding blood everywhere, none of the police on site knew what had happened, to not being able to see him or go to the hospital while he had emergency surgery, removing 8 inches of intestinal tract and putting back together his neck wound, there were hours of the most pain of my life, where I don't know if I was about to lose my best friend. I had no ability to cry. I just screamed and nothing came out. I was on the ground, unable to breathe, with no one able to give me answers. I've had many sorrows, but none were felt with this level of overwhelming pain. Tooth pain. I grew up poor and was never taken to a dentist, and have been paying for it in adulthood. I've never experienced worse pain than having multiple infected teeth that needed root canals. The kind of pain that was so intense that a handful of Advil and dabbing Orajel on the teeth did nothing. During the worst of it, I lived in a high-rise in San Francisco and contemplated jumping off the balcony at times just to stop the pain. And it's interesting how an infected tooth or teeth can make pain radiate all around your mouth, making it difficult to even tell which tooth is infected sometimes. Fortunately, I have a great dentist, and after about a dozen root canals and multiple fillings and crowns, I now have a great smile, and all of my teeth were saved, for now.